Today is the last week that we are going to study mark making and media. The medium that we are going to use today is collage. Collage, I think it's amazing and I love to see people use it, but it's probably the medium that I use the least. And as I was brainstorming, what can I do with collage and how can I push the boundaries and make marks? The things that came to mind are that collage is a totally different ballgame because it depends on what paper you're using. That's kind of the medium, is the paper. And so here I'm putting down a transparent piece of paper so that it looks like water and goes over these fish. It can also be in the way that you use the paper. So all of these pieces so far that I've glued down are all torn. I've torn them all by hand. But another way that you can do it is cutting it. So like the little flower that's in the left corner, those things were cut with scissors. I don't know this medium really well, but I think that it's really fun to play with, and because I don't know it well, it opens up my mind to a lot more opportunity because it really is a lot of play that I have not experienced before. So let's talk about paper. Most of the paper that I used on this is paper that I have painted myself and added textures and added handwriting to. So you can go crazy with designing your own paper. I didn't show that process happening because one, I already pre-made this paper. Sometimes if I'm coming into the studio and I'm a little bit tired, then I will make paper instead. I'll just make marks on paper, just like we've been doing the last couple of weeks. So I could take all of those papers that we've made the last couple of weeks and cut them and use them for collage. Another thing is that I feel like I cheated just a tiny bit because I did use some medium that is not in our boxes. I just used it for the translucent piece of paper that I glued in the middle, and then I kind of used it on a few things just because I had it on my brush still. But now from here on out, I'm going to use my glue stick, because the reason I did that is I wasn't sure if the glue stick, the purple glue, would ever dry, and I didn't want the purple to show through the translucent paper. So you can use your own painted paper, which I personally think is the funnest because it truly comes from you all the way down to the paper. Nobody's going to have the same kind of paper that you have, that you painted and made marks on and did designs and added texture on. The other thing that you could do, you can use scrapbook paper. You could use maps of places that you've been. You can use newspaper. I've used newspaper in my collages before. The possibilities are endless. If it's paper, you can use it. If it's you could use tissue paper from Christmas or paint your own tissue paper. I actually love using tissue paper and newsprint because they are thinner material, so they glue down and it almost incorporates into the last piece of paper. They become one thing. And I also like using the translucent paper. I like to be able to see what's underneath it. Okay, so another fun thing that I noticed about collage also is the fact that you can move it around is really enjoyable process for me because it is unlike any other medium. You can play with space, you can play with composition, and there's no easier way to play with composition than using collage rather than drawing it and painting over those lines, or drawing it and erasing and drawing it again and trying to figure it out. Collage, you can move it anywhere until you get it right. So I do like that aspect of collage because you'll see that I move these little rocks all over the page until I find a place for them. Another paper that I love using to make collage papers is deli wrap. So you can order it on Amazon in little boxes and they come in sheets, or I'm sure you can buy it anywhere they sell food supplies things. But I love that paper. It I print off my jelly plates and it takes really well, and it kind of has the same effect of tissue paper, but it's a little bit thicker so it doesn't tear as easily. So here I am playing with these petals, and I am trying to decide if I put them all the way around or if I make them more of a flower like eucalyptus. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out something with them. And then I slide them down like that, and they all squish together. And I really liked that. So I decided to squish them together. So this really is a very intuitive process. It's play and it's letting things happen, and then you run into happy accidents and you find your way. Another thing that I really appreciate about collage is because the paint is already on the paper, it's really easy to decide between values and decide when you need a piece that will just pop out. And that's what I felt like needed to happen in the center of this is I needed some contrasting colors so that it popped out and gave it more dimension. It's it's a lot easier to figure that out with collage. So I'm thinking that collage might be a really great medium to use to learn how to design in a better way, in a more thoughtful way. Whether it's through making interesting shapes, using the space well, composition, and even down to value, collage is an amazing medium to help you see things better. There is one downside that I'm finding to collage though is getting glue on my fingers. That I don't know why it's just so sticky, it drives me crazy. I'm used to having messy hands. I always have paint and other things all over my hands. But I guess I have to draw the line somewhere, and having glue stick on my fingers drives me crazy. So you don't see this, but I have a wet wipe in one of my hands trying to wipe it off, but it's just making it even more sticky. So I start to like stick to the paper, and it does annoy me just a little bit. But so maybe that's where you use the gel medium rather than glue sticks. Also, just a note on gel medium. I think it's actually the better thing to use here anyways. That's usually what you would use to collage because it wets the paper. It helps you to be able to smooth out the paper and really you paint on the bottom of it and the top of it. But I didn't do that here once again because we have our art box, and I'm trying to stay with the medium and the supplies that we have in our art box because we really can do all of it with those supplies. Now, I'm looking around at this design, and there are just some things that really bother me, like having the petals stick up at the top of that. I felt like I stuck them out way too much. So I'm just going to keep on playing with it until I feel like it feels good to me. I know that's very ambiguous, and some would say even artsy fartsy, to be like, do what you feel feels good to you. We call that intuition in the art world, and we are going to talk about intuition more in the weeks to follow. But it really is the truth. You have to find out what feels good to you. What colors do you like to use? What lines do you like to make? What comes from you? What comes from you? Now, all artists are inspired by other artists, and they see things that other artists do and they'll incorporate them. But in the end, you're going to be a whole collection of things that you see and experiences you have. And so let that be okay. Learn to deal with the discomfort, the not knowing, and the searching and finding out. That's part of the art process. So you'll notice that I'm working the whole piece. I work in one corner and then I move to the other corner, and I'm working around the piece. And that is pretty standard even in the way that I draw and paint. Is I'm always working the whole piece and trying to get the big picture and the big composition before I focus on little tiny details. So what I'm trying to figure out here is what feels balanced to me. We've already discussed how aloof the word balance is. And in this composition, it is an asymmetrical balance. I have my oval in the middle, and then I'm working around that oval, but each side isn't exactly the same as the other side. So here I'm just playing with the piece and trying to create balance. So I wanted the grasses to be behind the flower and pop the flower out. I felt like the flower and the rocks were too close in value and color. And so I wanted to put some green behind them, but I couldn't get the pieces up. I glued them down too well. And so I had to stick them underneath the rock where the piece was still not glued down all the way. It's funny now that I'm watching this video over again as I do my voiceover, and I'm realizing I could have added the green just by cutting around the piece, and I don't know why that didn't occur to me at the time. But I might have to come back to this piece and go add a little chunk of green behind the flower because I figured out how to do it now. I loved the pop of color. I loved the warm and cool contrast in this piece, and I felt like I needed a little bit more of that accent color. So I'm cutting another water lily out and putting some more in there so that there is another pop of color. You will notice that the flower that I added is not as intense as the oranges, and that is on purpose because I don't want to take away from my focal point, which is the fish jumping out of the water. And he has this really bright, vibrant orange, which is complementary to the blues, and I don't want to take away from him, so I'm using a more dull and muddied, almost even a purplish pink color, so that it's still adding that color throughout the piece, but it's not detracting or fighting with the focal point. I hope that you guys had as much fun with collage as I did. I know for me that I am going to use this medium more. And I hope you guys have an awesome day, and we will see you next week.